Okay, welcome to our webinar tonight. I'm so happy to have all of you with us, and we know other people will be joining later tonight. I'll try to watch for them in the waiting room, and we know that there's some people online and some people who will be watching it after. So we appreciate your interest in this topic. I have a child with a disability as well, and so this information weighs heavy on my heart every day. And I am just happy to try to connect you with the resources and tools that you need. So let's get started here. The first thing that I just wanted to put out there is a little disclaimer, and it just says that Caring Tide respects every individual's right to express who they are. In one-on-one discussions, we will use person first or identity first language based on the person's preference. In group settings, we will use a mix of the two in the hopes of having everyone feel like they are being included and respected. So my name is Jenny Dopp, and I am actually the director of Caring Tide. And so I facilitate all of our programs that help families and connect them with disabilities and services. So if you end up working with Caring Tide, there's a good chance you'll be working with me. But I am also the disability navigator, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a picture of my family. I have a lot of adult children, and you can see my son there, Jackson, is in a gray sweater, and he has a rare chromosome duplication. They don't name syndromes anymore. It's just by the location of the duplicated gene. And so he has 7q11.23 duplication, and then he also has autism. And as you can see by that red rock, we are located in Utah. And we enjoy our surroundings here. But the great thing about Caring Tide is we help families all across the United States. So I have worked just today with a mom in Minnesota and in Texas and in Massachusetts. So no matter where you are, I have services that can help you. So if you'll just take a minute and put in the chat where you are located, I would love to kind of get a feel for who we have here tonight. Some of the resources we talk about, like a Medicaid waiver, are disability specific, state specific for their disability, and other resources that we'll talk about tonight are across the US. And that's what's great about Caring Tide is I can help you figure out where your resources are, no matter where you are. So we have upstate New York, Utica, Florida, Utah, another Utahn. Great. For anybody who just joined, we're just putting where we're located in the chat. Get a feel for everyone that's here tonight. Okay, well, I also want to offer you a free gift, kind of a free resource. So we have this national directory that we've put together, and I've sourced resources from across the United States. Every state is represented in this directory, and it will give you a really good idea of resources in your area that you might not be aware of. And I'm always working on this and updating it because people change their websites, nonprofits close, new resources come open. And so if you stay until the end of the call, our staff will take a look at the log. And this is only available for those that joined live tonight. So anybody who's watching this as a recording, you won't be able to receive this, but our staff will send this to you in an email tomorrow. And there's a couple of things I want you to pay attention to. Every state has a disability center. Usually it's housed within a university. For instance, ours in Utah is through Utah State University. We also have a parent center in every state. Some states go by different names. In Utah, it's called the Utah Parent Center. In another state, it might be the Pacer Center. And so I have it labeled in that directory under Parent Center. Every state has a disability law center that you'll want to work with, and then also things like vocational rehabilitation. So we have all of that sorted for you by state, and then there's additional resources as well. And if you have a great resource, reach out to us, and we'd love to add it so that it's more comprehensive for more families. Okay, I wanted to give you just a little bit of background. This is our founder, Brady Murray. And Brady has 11 children, if you can believe it. He has biological children, and then he has adopted children. And he has two children with Down syndrome, and then he has other children that have a chromosome duplication or things like ADHD. And the reason why this started, that he started Caring Tide, It's a disability planning company, is because when his first son, Nash, was born, his wife said to him, okay, what are we going to do when we're no longer able to care for Nash? And they immediately thought of their older daughter, that maybe she would, take the reins and take over. But then as they thought about it, they thought, no, we need to be more strategic about this, more thoughtful about this. We don't know what our older daughter's situation will be. We don't know if she'll be able to care for Nash. And so they really put some thought into helping families like mine, like Brady's, and like yours care for their kids that have disabilities. Now, this is Nash. He's in high school now, and he loves school. But what about when that school bus stops coming, right? All of us have thought about that. School is such a great tool for our families. And if you still have children in school who are on IEPs, we can help you with that as well, answer your special education questions. But sometimes there's questions about graduation, a post-high program, what might be the best fit. And then you get into a situation like me where my school bus has stopped coming. And so what do we do when that school bus stops coming and some of those resources that we've depended on for 18 or 22 years are no longer available to us? The other question a lot of us ask is, what will happen to my loved one when I am no longer able to take care of them? And you'll notice that I say take care of them because that could mean a little bit different things for everyone. It might be when we pass away, or it might be, when our health changes. And so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. And this came about not only because of the question that Brady's wife asked him, but because as he's interacted in all of his various capacity over the past 22 years in the disability community, he's seen this question a lot. And this is one specific mom who's an influencer on Instagram in a way that supports families like ours with disabilities. And you'll see this question. I had a revelation today, one that rocked me. I have a 13-year-old, amazing yet complicated son with severe nonverbal autism. And lately he has really been struggling in the evenings. Most have no idea. Many probably wouldn't believe it. And today, I realized it's not the meltdowns that are breaking me. It's the worry of who will do this after I'm gone. I'm terrified. And I can totally relate to this as a mama because I'm my son's person. I am the one that addresses meltdowns, medication, doctor's appointments, surgeries, all of those things. And while we have a great supportive family, I've been his person. For better or for worse, right? You take the mental and emotional and sadly sometimes physical beatings, but you also deal with that heavy mental load that we as parents carry. And when she posted this, she started to get the same types of responses from other moms. I'm terrified for the future of my 3-year-old daughter. Who will love and care for her like I do? I feel this. I have 2 boys on the spectrum, and it brings me to tears at the thought of it. And so these are questions that we want to help families answer. These are some of the questions that we get with disability planning. These are kind of like the top 10. Well, what is a guardian? And do I need to obtain guardianship, limited or full? A lot of people don't know there's a difference when my child turns 18, or is an alternative to guardianship a better fit? And a lot of families don't even know what those alternatives to guardianship are and why it's important to consider that, why it's important to give, to pick the best option for your family. Not everybody needs guardianship. And a lot of times, especially when we're in school and we hear, okay, our child's 17 and a half and they're turning 18, and mom, you need to get guardianship because it's the age of majority, meaning it's the age when they turn 18 in school and they become a legal adult. And so you're not going to be invited to the IEP meeting anymore if you don't get guardianship. You'll hear all these types of questions, or the state will take my kids when my child turns 18, all of these things that kind of circulate in our community. And so it's really important to have the information and to understand it so that you can make the best choice for your family. Is guardianship the correct option? Is a supported decision-making model the best option? Would we be okay with like a conservatorship model or a power of attorney? These are all questions that we kind of help you talk through. Another question we get a lot, if there are assets worth more than $2,000 in my child's name, will they lose their public benefits? And when I say public benefits, I'm talking about things like Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Medicaid waivers, things like that. How do I prevent my child from becoming ineligible for these benefits? Because yes, you might have a child that has high needs. Maybe they need 24/7 care. But if we're not careful with how we plan our assets and our resources for our children, it is possible for them to lose that funding. When is it best to create, or sorry, I have a will. Why is a special needs trust important? So how are those things different? And people hear the term special needs trust. There's also terms power of attorney, again, conservatorship, a supplemental needs trust, a third party supplemental needs trust. And we help you understand all of these terms. But for the case, for our class tonight, just to simplify things, we're just going to call it a special needs trust. And we'll just understand that to mean this is a tool, a receptacle for all of your assets to protect them and provide for your loved one later. So a special needs trust, even though that's, there's lots of terms for these different kinds of trusts. So when is it best to create one? What happens if I die and I don't have a supplemental needs trust? Is my child automatically kicked off Medicaid? Can I just leave my money and assets to a sibling or a child to use for my loved one's benefit? What is a trustee and who should be my trustee? Are there other fiduciaries I should consider as part of my plan? How often should I update my estate planning documents? And sometimes we even hear this, we've got it covered, we're all set. Why should I consider public assistance programs? Or why should I reevaluate my trust? Or why should I reevaluate my life insurance? So these are a lot of the questions that we get. So if I just want to get a feel for what keeps you up at night. What are the things that you worry about? What are your biggest questions? I would love to know because I can gear our next training to some of your questions and we can focus on topic specific trainings. We try to do these trainings several times a month. Upcoming trainings will be on ABLE accounts, some different life insurance options to help fund your special needs trust. I can do a class on guardianship, all of those types of things. So if you'll just take just a minute and we'll just take like, 30 seconds. And I just want to see what kind of things weigh on your mind as parents or as caregivers. Some of you are grandparents. Some of you are siblings that are caring for loved ones. Does anyone have any deep thoughts about their concerns or questions? Okay, well, we'll just keep moving forward. I'm glad that you all are feeling so comfortable because as a mom, I do this every day and there's still questions that I have on, gosh, what could I be doing better about this? What's the answer here? And so I look at that for our family and then I figure out what is the next right step. And that's one thing that we're going to talk about tonight is none of us on this call have it all figured out. So I don't want anybody to feel bad about their situation or that you feel like you're failing as a mom or a dad or a grandparent. Everybody's doing the best they can. We have a heavy load on our families and on our shoulders, and it's just doing the next right step. Everybody can do one thing. So Karen had a great question. Estate plan is all set up, but where will they actually live? And we are going to talk about that tonight, Karen. So good question. Okay, so let's jump into it. So the number one concern is who will care for my child if I can't? And I want to change that to be when I can't. So about 5 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer and it was a total surprise. He was only like 45-ish when he was diagnosed. And the first thing I automatically thought of once we processed his diagnosis was, oh my gosh, I hope our short-term life insurance that we purchased when we were young and just out of college, I hope it's still in effect. And I just thought, what if I don't have the resources? He earns the majority of our income. What will I do? And not only that, but what will happen to Jackson if I don't have all of these things set up? So what about the key takeaway tonight? What am I hoping that you'll get out of this? The key to your child with a disability, the key to your child with a disability thriving long-term is creating a comprehensive care blueprint that combines the legal protection, financial planning, and the community supports. It really takes all three of those things put into place in order for your plan to work and actually be executed. And I want to add a fourth step. The fourth step is reviewing on a regular basis all of those plans that you've put into place because things change. For instance, my caregiver that I have set up for Jackson went through a life care change or life situation change, and she would no longer be able to care for Jackson. And so those things, you can't just think it's one and done. This is something that you would want to look at and evaluate on an ongoing basis. And so we'll kind of talk about that tonight as we go through it. And then Chad asked the question, do you have classes on navigating special needs trusts after a settlement? How to best protect and make sure my child's settlement is secured safely to make sure she has a successful life, even if we parents pass early. Yes, we can help you with that as well. And it's best for specific situations to maybe help you one-on-one because all of our situations are different. But we definitely can help you with the special needs trust and making sure the assets are secured. So let's get into all 4 steps of our plan. And again, you guys can put questions in the chat. I'm flying solo tonight, so I'll do my best to answer them. And we'll have a lot of fun working together. Okay, so the first step that we want to look at is understanding where you are. The second step is performing an audit. Creating a plan is number 3. And then the last step we'll go over is getting your house in order. And some of these we're going to go into more detail on, and some of them will just be, we'll touch base on them. And so step number 1 is understanding where you are on your journey. So this is Brady when he adopted his son Cooper from China. And as we think about our kids, whether they're adopted or biological, or we're caring for a sibling, let's just be honest with ourselves and think about where we are. So where are we today? What's happening? What's making us white knuckle it through the day? Where are we nailing it? What's working really well for us? Where are we struggling? Where do we want to go? What do we want life to look like? Not only as a caregiver and thinking long-term about what our needs are as a caregiver. Think of it as the airplane. You put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help your loved ones. And then how are we going to get there? And when we think about our plan of how we're going to get there, maybe just use a little emoji and raise your hand or put yes or no in the chat. If you've ever heard of terms like self-determination or person-centered planning, because as a caregiver, I'm putting together this plan, right? And some of our kids are very high need, maybe nonverbal, high level of autism, maybe totally tech dependent, trach, utilizes a wheelchair, whatever our situation will be. And then other individuals might have more autonomy or independence. But regardless of our situation, we need to remember that this is our children's life, and we need to try to involve them in the planning as much as possible. So self-determination means that Jackson gets to determine the course of his life. Of course, I have to guide and direct and say, yes, we can do that, or gosh, how are we going to accomplish it? Let's find resources. But also person-centered planning. Jackson gets to say, what does he want the next 5 years of his life to look like? Where does he want to live? Maybe he wants to live with us forever. How can we build in that support system so I can have respite and take a break and go on vacation? Or maybe he wants to live with a friend in an apartment. How can I make that happen? So that's self-determination, helping them determine their life as much as possible. And again, I understand our children all need support. That's why we're here tonight, right? So with planning these questions, we have to understand how will we get there? And these are all areas that we need to consider. We need to consider their housing, just like was asked earlier, their independence. How can I give him autonomy? For so many years, I've been the mama bear running the show, pulling all the strings, making it happen. And he's 23 now. And I really need to figure out ways to cut back on that support in a way where he can learn those skills if I haven't already taught something to him, that I can give him as much independence and autonomy as possible. that I'm getting him out into the community, that I'm having him feel a part of his community, a social interaction. What's going to give Jackson the best quality of life? What about employment? Right now, he works about 3 to 4 days at McDonald's, and I had to facilitate that. It was going into McDonald's, looking to see if they'll hire, helping him prepare for the interview, talking to the manager. There's also great resources through vocational rehabilitation and job coaches and all of these other resources that I can help you navigate as being your disability navigator. And education, again, not only the IEPs and the 504 plans, but things like post-high, making sure your school district is using the data to prove that they qualify for post-high or not qualify, that they're not being forced to graduate. Looking at disability programs in your state for college experiences. For instance, in Utah, we have 3 different disability programs with Utah State University and also Utah Valley University. It's a total immersed experience where they're living on campus and going to class. There's also trade programs. Vocational rehabilitation pays for a lot of those, and so it's done through assessments, and we can help you figure out all of those pieces as well. So in addition to just that holistic view of our life, of our loved one's life, we have to think about these 3 core planning tools. So the disability resources, which I've talked a lot about so far, the legal aspect, which is things like your special needs trust, power of attorney, guardianship, all of those pieces, and then again, the financial planning. And you're thinking, gosh, well, what does that really mean, financial planning? I'm going to do a whole little section on that because that's one of the biggest pieces is what will happen to our kids after we pass or we can no longer care for them, and how am I going to pay for that, especially if they don't qualify or they can't access things like Social Security and Medicaid, which we'll talk about. So these are just kind of some of the resources. Those are the 3 steps. And then the 4th step comes in right here, where that wheel is constantly going around. Things are changing, things are evaluating. You have to monitor Jackson's income to make sure he isn't making too much at McDonald's so he doesn't lose his Social Security. There's all these factors that we need to constantly consider. Now let's talk a little bit about planning. Some of you are going to be, I saw one comment from Leilani, my child is 6 years old, and I'm trying to find out what is out there and get it set up now for when he's older. And Leilani, ABLE accounts, that's what we're going to talk about tonight too. That will be a key for you. So Leilani's back here in the birth to age 3, age 6. I'm clear up there in age 22. And I even have worked with moms who are 80 years old and they call and say, I can no longer lift my 60-year-old son out of the bathtub, or I can't get his wheelchair over the threshold of our door out to the paratransit. What resources are there for me? So believe me, as a mom and as a caregiver, there's going to be questions throughout your life. And when Jackson was first diagnosed with a rare chromosome duplication, we didn't really fit into a certain disability group, like support groups for Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, and the autism diagnosis for us came later. And so I really had to source a lot of this on my own. And so I don't want anybody in our network of Caring Tide to feel alone. You always have an advocate with me, and just reach out to me and let me see if I can help you. But as we start at birth, Jackson's disability was identified 5 months in utero with a brain structure anomaly. So our journey started really early. Some people aren't diagnosed till later. But at age 3, I strapped him into the special education school bus and harnessed him in. It was a hard day as a mom to like turn your little 3-year-old nonverbal child over to the school district and just like be hoping for the best. When he was born, I immediately thought of junior high and just thought, how are we going to survive junior high? That's hard enough for a neurotypical child. How is my child going to figure this out? And then, of course, when he turned 18, we had to look at advocating for him to be part of a post-high program rather than like kind of a, oh, it's time for you to graduate situation. We really had to work with the school district on that and advocate for his rights there. Applying for Social Security, guardianship, and then also, in the red, you'll see these milestones of what like a neurotypical family deals with. They just think, okay, let's get this child to graduation, get them launched and into college. And then what about my retirement and then my death, right? That's what a neurotypical family deals with. Our family has dealt with all of these kind of turquoise arrows. These are all the milestones we're thinking of. So not only getting Jackson graduated, but okay, how much we want to retire someday, right? My husband and I. So how much do we need for us? And then there's the piece about Jackson. And then, of course, preparing for our passing, making sure that we have that all taken care of so our kids don't have to. My parents both passed away within the last 3 years and didn't have a lot of life insurance or planning done. And so that fell on us as children to kind of scrape that all together and make it happen. And we want to make sure that we have that planned for our kids. And then also Jackson's passing, making arrangements so that he can be buried next to my husband and I, or whatever arrangements you feel best for your family. These are all things that we want to think about so that that doesn't fall on my other 3 children. If you're wondering right now, gosh, where do I fall in this? How am I supposed to make this happen? I want to put this link in the chat for you, and hopefully that will work for you. If it doesn't, just reach out to me. But this caringtide.com family assessment, this will help you go through from a high level all of the areas that we're talking about tonight and help you kind of identify some pain points or some gaps. And then we can address those together and figure out what would be the best way to fill those gaps or to get you resources. The second step is to perform a financial review. And I know this sounds scary. You're just thinking, oh, I wish I were in a better situation, or I don't want to talk to Jenny because we only have, this much money in the bank and we don't feel like we have a lot of assets, or we haven't done any planning. It's okay, because all of us have to start somewhere. And that is my job as the director of Caring Tide and your disability navigator, is to help you find that next right step. So this is the traditional planning model that a lot of families who are not impacted by disabilities go through. You start with that whole, emergency fund, you save a $500, save $1,000, and then you work towards paying off your debt. And then you grow your emergency reserves, and then you can start to accumulate assets as you get older and you earn more and you've been in the workforce longer. And then you can start to do some retirement planning. But why is planning for my family different than this model? Let me show you. With our family, we need to do life care planning. So we have to think about all of these steps, but we also have to think about proper gifting and inheritance management. I have to think about how I'm going to leave assets to my kids so that Jackson is protected. I need to make sure I have conversations with other family members so that grandpa or grandma or some other well-meaning and good-hearted individual doesn't leave assets to Jackson in their estate plan. I also have to think about how much this is going to cost long-term. So it's a lifetime of support. Yes, he's a contributing member to the community and has a great little job at McDonald's, but it's not a living wage. It's not something that he could provide for himself with just that funding. So I need to think about that lifetime of support. I need to think about how much money do I need to put in my trust so that the trust can be managed. Things like paying taxes and fees to professionals that will help us. What about that piece that we talked about earlier, the residential needs with housing, transition programs? How can I make sure that he's tapped into the government programs like SSI and Medicaid? And then also those cash reserves. I also need to make sure I'm thinking about things like our family mission statement. Have I communicated my wants and my needs to the other kids in our family who might be part of his care? Have I created my letter of intent, which we'll talk about tonight? And then also that special needs planning for the legal piece. So before we get started with the financial piece, I want to make sure we all understand a few pieces of terminology. So Medicaid is a thing, but there's like different windows to this house of Medicaid. So there's a piece of Medicaid that handles the health care, and that's based upon qualifying for that, whether it's on need or income level. There's also Medicare, and Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicare is typically for older individuals, and then there's also Medicaid waivers. And Medicaid waivers, it's called the home and community-based waivers. Every state has HCBS, home and community-based waiver systems, but they might call it something different. So in Utah, we have an organization, an agency of the state called DSPD, the Division of Services for People with Disabilities. and they manage all of Utah's waivers. But in order to get a waiver, and waivers pay for things like respite care, day programs, transportation, maybe in-home support with hygiene or self-care. Maybe they need help preparing meals or grocery shopping. All of those types of things can be handled through waiver services. The thing about a waiver is that every single state gets to manage their own waiver program. So that's what's great about a disability navigator is they can help you understand how to tap into your state's programs. And that's what I do, is to help you access your state's waiver system. The state gets to decide how you qualify for that. And so we go through and look at that. And Karen just said waivers do not cover housing. It depends upon how your system is set up. So for instance, in Utah, we are allowed to have residential care. Some of that funding goes to pay for part of that programming. So it depends upon how your state is set up, but the House, I hope that's not misleading you. The House is just to represent Medicaid in general. And then Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare, and Medicaid waivers represent the different windows. So I hope that wasn't confusing. But you know, it's supported living, it's supported services, and we just want to make sure that you know about your state's program so that you can tap into that. Okay, so to qualify for SSI, you cannot have more than $2,000 in your name, and that's any sort of asset. It's not just cash. So if you know, Jackson had a savings bond left to him or anything like that, that would qualify for an asset. So make sure that you're looking at your Social Security to make sure your loved one would qualify so that you can tap into both Medicaid for healthcare, Medicaid waivers if you qualify, and then also that SSI piece. And then other things that we need to think about as far as what to plan for cost, you know, because one of the biggest questions that we get, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is how much do I need to save? So you need to think about the cost of adult care supervision. Many of the families I work with, their youth need or their loved ones need 24/7 care. And so we need to think about the cost of day programs, the residency, the care of, you know, having somebody come into your home if you're planning on that to be the housing for your loved one, medical care, ongoing therapies, and a lot of therapies aren't covered by insurance. Things that actually benefit our kids like music therapy or horse therapy, art therapy. You have to figure out what your child needs and then build in the cost for that. And also don't forget about things like quality of life for recreation, vacations, education, appropriate social connections. And how are they going to get there? Transportation is huge, and it's often not a resource that's either covered or easily accessible, especially for safety. Some states have like an accessible self-driving system. I think it's Grand Rapids, Michigan has a great option for families with a self-driving system. Other states have a great metro system, and people can receive travel training through their disability organizations or vocational rehabilitation. Other people live in a rural setting and don't have a lot of access to transportation. And so that's something that you're going to want to budget for as well. And as Karen said later or earlier in the call, what about housing? And Karen, you're right. This is like a huge weight on all of us. So this is Utah. So if I had Jackson on SSI and the average would be like $983 per month, and that's without any of the reductions that a lot of people experience, that's not going to be enough to cover housing. Just for a 1-bedroom apartment in Salt Lake City metro area is $1,500 a month average. Now I could find him less expensive housing, but maybe it wouldn't be in a safer or as safe area. Or I could find a rural or suburban location that might be a little bit less. But here's the situation in Utah. We live across a mountain range, the Wasatch Mountains, and our transportation with our bus system, our metro, goes north to south. So even though Jackson only lives a mile from McDonald's in Utah, I cannot physically get him there without driving him there because it's not safe for him to walk. It's not safe for him to ride his bike because of a busy road that he would have to navigate. And the bus system, it would take him 4 times as long to get a mile trying to make the connections with the bus systems because we don't have a system that goes east-west. So think about when you're thinking about housing, also think about that transportation issue. And we'll have to be creative on that because Karen's right. Some waivers don't cover that. Or the way, maybe it's your Social Security that would help to pay for that. We have one program here that I could get him into, and he would have to have that Social Security to help pay for the housing piece with the room and board notation in Social Security. Also think about long-term care services for yourself, but also for your loved one. What's their level of medical need? The national average cost for a skilled nursing home stay is at least $100,000 per year in order to get into a facility. And so Medicare might cover part of that. Medicaid might cover part of that. SSI maybe could be used to help supplement, but you would need to really look at the specifics to see what would be allowed in your specific situation. What about if we have to care for our aging parents? As I said before, that landed on me and my siblings. So that's something that you'll want to factor in depending on how old you are and who you could still be responsible for. And will I ever be able to retire? What does that look like for our family? What would happen? This is the worst case scenario. What if I pass away prematurely? And also, what would happen if my husband, who makes the majority of our income, passes away prematurely? What would we do to supplement? And who would take care of Jackson? And then also the fun part, right? What about quality of life? How are we going to make sure that Jackson has the quality of life he has now after we're gone? So one thing that we do with Caring Tight is we really try to help families put a plan together. So these are the two sides of it. So there's the public benefit side that we've talked about, that house with Medicaid and Medicare, and then also Social Security. There's the medical care piece through Medicaid Health, and then also room and board that you can pay with your Social Security, basic personal needs, care and supervision, and employment activities. But things that are not covered by that where you're going to need to do some extra planning is the medical and dental care excluded from those social benefits that are not always covered. Also special gifts, professional fees. What about those support workers that are not covered by your waiver? Or what if you're like us? We've been on a waiting list for waivers for 10 years and probably will not ever get off because our state is very conservative and our legislature has not allocated enough funding for our Medicaid waiver system. So we sit on a waiting list year after year and probably will not ever make it off. So I can't even count on some of that funding on the left side. That's why it's so important for you to understand your state's program and what is and isn't covered and what's accessible. Some waivers that I've looked at don't even allow it until you're an older adult with a disability. And so it's very challenging to get a younger child with a disability on. So let me know if you're having trouble identifying where your resources are, and I'll try to help you with that. Things like vacations and computers. Our family loves the beach. It's like our happy place. So after I'm gone, would I want to make sure I've budgeted, a yearly beach trip in for Jackson so he can have that routine and those things that he's come to expect in his life. He is, in addition to his chromosome duplication, he's also on the autism spectrum, and politics is his superpower. He knows anything and everything about politicians, the different races that are happening. So you can imagine he's all sorts of excited about this fall and our political situation. And so what would happen if his iPhone broke or his computer broke? So I would need to make sure I budget in for him that he always has a budget for technology. Think about what makes your loved one's world go round. Do they love Slurpees? Do they have to have the latest sports team hat? Is that their obsession? Do they need a fuzzy blanket that, is a little pricey? What is it that really brings your loved one comfort? And think about all of the pieces we'll need to build into your plan. And also things like haircuts and personal hygiene, his shampoo and his shaving cream and, his new Star Wars t-shirt. How am I going to pay for all of those things? I can't just expect my kids, my other kids to pay for that. So this is how we're going to do it. And this is how we help you build a strategy for this funding. We look at your public benefits and what you're able to access. Not everybody qualifies for everything. You have to really get in there and apply for Social Security. A lot of people are denied the first time, so you appeal it. A lot of people don't get the waiver coverage, so they appeal that and they still might not get it. We need to look at your insurance, not only things like, your $10,000 policy through your employer, but also private insurance and your private assets. What will happen when we pass? Can we use the sale of our home to help fund another home for Jackson? Maybe we could buy a duplex and we rent out one side and then Jackson lives in the other side. What are some options for our family? So maybe let's just take, another 30 seconds here. And how many of you are on a waiver? How many of you get to tap into that? Maybe just type waiver into the chat and let me get a feel for how many of you are privileged enough to access your waivers. Is there anybody on that? Oh, good, Karen, you've got it for both sons. And Karen, remind me what state you're in. Let me scroll back and see. Oh, you're in Florida. Okay. Wonderful. Some of the people I work with in Florida have a really hard time accessing benefits and services, so I'm glad that you're tapped into that. And Leilani, great. The MCCW, that's a new waiver in Utah, and that's a great tool to be tapped into, especially until you can get the CSW waiver. Okay, and then natural supports. Some people are not familiar with natural supports. So for Jackson, that would be neighbors that know him, his church community, his people that he still keeps in touch with from school, not necessarily like friends, quote unquote, but his support system. Sometimes when I'm busy with meetings at work, I'll just text my neighbor and say, can you run down the street and pick up Jax? And they'll run down for me. So all of those people, aunts and uncles that are in his life that are supportive, those are his natural support system. Okay, so how much is enough? How many of you can answer this question? How many of you have figured the answer to this out? This is a question a lot of people have a problem figuring out. So can you answer this question for your family? You can just type yes or no. How much is enough to prepare for your retirement and also the care of your loved ones? And have you figured this out for your family? And I would love to know if anybody's done that. Karen struggled with it as well. One of the tools, Leilani, this might be a good tool for you to check into, and it's good for everybody actually on this call, but Leilani, especially because your son is 6, this is something where the earlier you start, the better. But if you have heard of the ABLE account and you haven't tapped into it, I would definitely recommend looking into it. This is not a replacement for a special needs trust, but this is a tool that can help support you. And so the purpose of the ABLE is a savings account, and it allows you to save money in an account so that it does not count against your asset limit of that $2,000. And so here's a couple of limitations. You can contribute about $18,000 a year. They raise that limit every year. Last year it was 17 something, and this year it's up to 18,000. And then if you are working, you can also contribute additional funding. So Jackson could put in 18,000 a year that would not count against that $2,000 threshold. And then he could also add that $14,000 plus a year. He can go all the way up to 100,000 a year before he would lose his SSI and his Medicaid. And there's also the maximums are actually up to, between 235,000 and 550,000, depending upon what which program you're part of. And so you can go on to the National ABLE Accounts website and you can, click on your state and see what your program structure is. But the great thing about it is there's other programs that you can tap into. So Utah has a new ABLE program within the last couple of years, but we actually are part of Ohio's plan. And so there's different rates, there's different fees. It only charges us, maybe less than $10 a quarter to be part of the program. And then that money is investable so that we can have it can be tax-free. We pay taxes on it going into the account, like when he gets his paycheck, but then I can put the money into his ABLE account. I just want to make sure I do it before the end of the month so that it doesn't count against the $2,000 when Social Security is being evaluated. And then when you pull it out, of course, there's no tax on that. So it's a great option for people in order to save money. Again, it's that $2,000 threshold. It's similar to like a 529 account. And so you can work with our financial planning team to better understand ABLE accounts, and we can help you look at all of the pros and cons for different programs. Some things that you'll just want to, consider is that it's not a replacement for a special needs trust like that, like saving money in the trust where I can put an asset in the trust. And there is this Medicaid payback option. So, or not option, but it's a restriction. So once my child passes away, Medicaid would look at that and say, okay, how much since the time you've opened your ABLE account, how much in Medicaid have we paid out to you? And then they could go into the ABLE account and get that Medicaid payback. So you want to be balanced about your approach and not just assume you're going to put everything into the ABLE account because there are limitations like that. So we'll send this out. You can look over these slides and you can also reach out to me if you have questions. So let's answer this question for this hypothetical family. How much is enough? So Marty's 17 years old today. His parents are 54 and 53. They want him to have about $4,000 per month to live on from his age 25 to the end of his life. You can see down there at the bottom some things that we're assuming, that there's a 6% annual compound return on assets, a 3% inflation rate, and then we're also taking into account some SSI from his parents. So here's some things that we can do. It will take about $3 million from the time when his dad dies at age 85 to support Marty from his age of 48 until the time Marty's age 85. So, I mean, if we just have a lot of money lying around, we can invest a lump sum today of $620,000. And assuming that we can find a 6% return rate every year, then we can secure that money. But many people don't have that. And so we're going to allocate some estate planning. We're going to allocate assets of our home, our 401k, our Roth, any other life insurance policies we have. We can put all of those in a trust. We can utilize life insurance, and there's a lot of options. There's a short-term life insurance, but of course the downside to that is it will end, just like when my husband had cancer and I was trying to figure out if our policy had ended. There's whole life policies, and there's a lot of different investment options that we can walk you through. Also that ABLE account, that's really helpful because for our program, there's a stable card. It's like a debit card attached to that ABLE account. So Jackson could go and use his debit card, his stable card, and pay for his haircut or pay for his McDonald's meal or his Slurpee. And that would all come out of that ABLE account. Sometimes you just want to make sure you're being thoughtful about it and possibly saving receipts in case you are ever audited, because you want to make sure you're using the ABLE account funding for their care and not, paying for things that wouldn't qualify. And we can show you what all of those qualifications are. You can also think of out-of-the-box strategies. Now, we're not advocating for credit card debt, but sometimes when you have a credit card or a debit card, you can round up, not necessarily a credit card, but a debit card. So with my credit union, I go to Walmart and I charge $19.50 on my debit card, and then I can round that up, the last 50 cents, to a dedicated savings account. That's an easy way to save for every purchase that you're making. You could save, $20 each week for 1 year, and that will save you $1,000 a year that can be leveraged, and you can use that money to pay for life insurance. So no matter what our situation is, we can help you get creative and try to figure out different options to help you with your planning, because it's overwhelming, especially if we're on a really fixed income. Maybe some of us have a lot of assets, and it might be easier to navigate and do some planning and be resourceful. But our goal is to try to help every family choose that next right step. So let's take another situation. This is a middle-class family, 2 income streams. Bob and Susan are 35. They have Shane, and he's going to need a lifetime of support. Shane is 10 years old, and together they earn about $150,000 annually. So these are some quick bullet points that Bob and Susan could execute. They could make sure that Shane is eligible for SSI and Medicaid. If your child is younger than 18 and they qualify for SSI, It's, based usually on the parents' income, but once they're 18 and older, they're considered an adult. So it's based on their income. So you'll want to be mindful of how much they're earning if you feel like they might qualify. And then also make sure you access that for them. And if you get denied the first time, which most people do, please appeal it and work with an advocate, work with us to see if we can help you secure that because it can be an important tool. You could purchase group term life insurance on both parents through your employers. That's a really low cost option. And the only downside to that is if your employment ends, then your life insurance could possibly end. So you want to be mindful of that. You would want to have a will and a revocable trust drafted. And you would want to add that special needs, the supplemental special needs trust for Shane onto your trust. And then make sure all of your beneficiary designations are coordinated with your estate account. So that means, like on my life insurance policies, instead of it being my kids spelled out, all four children, when my husband passes, his assets will go to me. And then our trust is named in the event of my death. It doesn't go to all four kids, it goes to the trust. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I can protect Jackson's piece, but I can also put some safeguards in for my other kids. So for instance, I just had a child graduate from high school. I can give her some of the money now so that she can use that for college. And then maybe I would want to wait and give her another lump sum when she was 25, when her, frontal cortex is more developed and she can make better choices. And then maybe when she's 30, maybe I want to allocate that later in life for her. So you get to, as you set up your trust, you get to make these decisions. You also could contribute to that ABLE account that we talked about. Another option that some people do, and it might be less expensive than two policies, is to do a survivorship whole life policy. And that's where it's the first person after the second parent dies is usually when it's funded. And that can be a great tool for people. And not a lot of people know about that. And so that could be an option that we could walk you through as well. And then we can go through some of these, but we're running a little bit short on time. So if we haven't covered either a single parent limited income where you're just making it month to month, we can walk through some options for you with the single parent income, with tapping into the Social Security and at least starting the planning process, even if you don't have a lot of assets to put into that. And I'm just going to show these slides really quick and then you can watch it on the replay and pause. But we don't have enough time to go through all of it. And then here is the hardcore truth, right? The hardcore truth is that we all have an expiration date on our mortality. We have three choices on how we can handle that reality. We can deny it, we can ignore it, or we can plan for it. And so even though this is heavy information, we really do want to help you put your house in order, which is that last step, step number 4. And again, we won't have time to go through all of these steps tonight, but as we're helping you put that final step 4 plan into place, these are the issues that we help you look at. Does your family have a mission statement? Or has it been communicated to everyone what your values are, what you want to have happen for your loved one? Have you written that letter of intent? Things like, what is your plan for his medical care? What about education? What about employment? Have you gone through and determined all those costs? For Social Security, Medicaid, day programs, medication. Have you worked with that attorney to figure out who the guardians will be, who's going to be the executor and the trustee? These are all things that we can help you figure out. And then also implementing your plan. It's kind of a tricky thing to do, with families because it's hard conversations. And some people, have a hard time expressing all the information that they need shared. And so we help you with that letter writing and of course the annual review. So this is just an example of that mission statement for Brady, always there to always care, always loving and supporting each other no matter what, and strive to show kindness. If he was gone, he would want to make sure the guardian of Cooper and Nash knew what their family mission focus was and the things that they care about. He would want that letter of intent to include all of these pieces that are important to his family. The family history, what's his family history? What's his wife's family history? The medical piece, residential and social behavior. Behavior is really tricky, right? We know the triggers for our kids, But would the person who's picking up the pieces tomorrow know the triggers for your kids? Are they documented in your letter of intent? There's a lot of things to know about a letter of intent, that it's not legally binding. I can name a guardian in a trust, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll become the guardian. They still have to go through the guardianship process. And so that's kind of my job as your disability navigator, is to help you walk through it. And I can help you, find resources for all of these different topics that we've discussed tonight. And then this is Max. I want to point out that he has the special designation as a financial planner. He's a chartered special needs consultant. So that means as a financial planner, he's gone through extra training. He knows the questions to ask. He knows the questions to ask. He helps us figure out all of the things that we don't necessarily know. Um, like I just remember my first IEP. Do you remember yours? You're sitting down at the table at the school and they're telling you all the things, and you're just like, great, this is so informative. I'm so excited. I'm nervous, but I think it's going to be okay. And then you get to, your ninth grade year or your senior year in high school, and you know the procedural safeguards for special education. You know how to advocate. You know when Mama Bear needs to come out. You know how the data is what determines the goals in the IEP. And that's what Max does as a chartered special needs consultant. Financial planners are on every corner, but not every financial planner is a chartered special needs consultant. So whether you choose to work with Caring Tide or another organization, make sure they're experienced with special needs trust, make sure they're experienced with special needs planning so that you can get the most accurate plan possible. And then of course you can meet with our estate planner, JJ, and he can help you draft a special needs trust. We draft trusts for every state across the country. And so no matter where you live, we have resources for you. This is just a snapshot of all of the things that we can help you with. Adult healthcare transitioning from pediatric healthcare to adult healthcare, those employment supports, the post-high programs, transportation and trying to source resources you might not know about. For instance, just a brand new resource that came about in Utah is somebody who will assess Jackson's ability to drive. Jackson wants to get his driver's license, but that terrifies me as a mom. And so there's a brand new resource that other people in Utah are not aware of this driving assessment tool. So I really do a deep dive on your state and dig into it for you to try to find those resources. So just to recap in closing, what are the steps? Step number one, be real about where you are. If you're just at the beginning and you have a 6-year-old, jump in, let us help you. If you, have a 40-year-old child, I bet there's still things that we can try to help make it better and more complete for you with your plan. Make sure we do the resource maximization and you're tapped into all of everything that you can access. Number 2 is that financial review, the financial audit. How can we customize your plan for you? Great, you already have all of the life insurance you need. Let us look at it, make sure, like today we were working with a mom and she was being charged like 1.5% by the person managing her 401k, and our rate is 0.01 something, and so our rate was a lot better, and that was going to save her money on something that she already had established that she thought was taken care of. Let us do a review for you and see if we can find a better tool for you, something that's more up to date. Maybe you set your plan up 5 years ago. Maybe there's better services out there for you now. And then that third step is to create the plan. It's all that heavy lifting. Where are they going to live? How are we going to pay for it? Who's going to be the executor? Who's going to be the trustee? Do we have that letter of intent written? And then the fourth step, let's get your house in order. Let's make sure that plan is executable. Let's make sure that we have all the pieces set up for you. And I just want to say thank you for those listening tonight. We have that free gift for you. And so we'll make sure and get that out to you tomorrow. I just wanted to stop sharing for just a minute. And I want to find one more resource for you to put up. This resource, let me share it with you, is for a free consultation. And we can go through and make sure that your resources, are you guys all seeing that? I think I need to put it in a slideshow for you. Hopefully you're still seeing that. But we can use that link that is up on your screen, and we will go through a free consultation for you, and I can say, you know what, it sounds like you're good to go. I don't think, we have anything for you, or I can give you a few ideas about ways that Caring Tide might be able to help you. So there is the link, finally. Sorry for the delay with my one girl show tonight, for a free consultation. And I'd love to help you if you feel like you need that support or want to just, talk and see where we can help you. So any questions tonight? I'll just open it up. We're at our full hour, so I'd be happy to stay on. And I love it. Chad said special needs parents aren't allowed to expire. And you're right. You're right. We are not. Hopefully we'll all outlive our kids, right? So you're welcome to unmute if you have a question, or if there's something that I said tonight that isn't quite clear, I'm happy to expound on that. Or you can, if you don't want to unmute, you can put your question in the chat. Maybe we can just do one final note in the chat. How many of you have tapped into an ABLE account? How many of you are utilizing that? It's a great tool. A lot of people think, oh, great, I don't need to get a special needs trust. I can just put it all in the ABLE account. But it is something that you'll want to consider. It's not a replacement for a special needs trust. It's definitely just another tool. And Karen, you're on top of it. Both your boys have waivers and they both have ABLE accounts. You're a rock star mom. So you just need to figure out housing. That's your biggest key. And Leilani's heard of ABLE and was told it was not allowed in Utah 3 years ago. We do have ABLE now. So you can Google Utah ABLE, and or you can pull up Google National ABLE, and you'll be able to tap into, let me unmute Karen. You'll be able to tap into the national resources. And Karen, I'm trying to unmute you, but it just says to ask you to unmute. I don't think I can unmute you. But you can type in the chat unless it's too hard and too long. And if that's the case, you can just use that link and set up a consultation with me. Any other questions? If you're worried that you don't have enough income for life insurance services, like I said, there's services depending upon, your income level. We can try to find something that's a good fit for you. One mom that I talked to today is working on $1 million policy, and another mom is working on a $50,000 policy. And when my kids were born, we were able to set up inexpensive life policies for them because we were younger and didn't have enough resources. And, if you have a lot of assets and you're just not sure how to manage them, or maybe you want us to look at your asset portfolio and see if it's being managed in the most efficient way possible, we're happy to look at that as well.
I think I got unmuted.
Oh, good, Karen.
Okay, hi. So I'm Karen Jawitz. I am the parent of a almost 37-year-old and 34-year-old, both diagnosed with autism, both on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so I've done a lot of this. I've been doing this a very long time. Although I will call you for a consultation. There are some things that sort of triggered my thoughts. Well, maybe we didn't do it that way. I do think trustee is the stumbling block for most of us.
Yep.
And it has stopped our planning. And we're actually interviewing professional trustees this week because even though I have a neurotypical daughter, she does have her own life. And it is complicated, especially when you come to tax planning and tax returns for each of these trusts. And So we are like thinking about, like I said, professional trustee, actually a corporate trustee. Not
Yes.
an individual, but a corporation, because there's both. But it's really challenging. And to us, that was the hardest part, or is the hardest part. The other thing I wanted to mention, I keep saying housing. So I'm a co-founder of an organization in Miami, Florida called Casa Familia Inc. And we just broke ground on our first affordable housing for adults with intellectual, developmental, and other related disabilities. You can find us there, Casa Familia Inc. Our first phase, which is going to be for independent living, is 50 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and an 11,000 square foot community center. It's a community, and it is in the heart of Miami. It is not, as you were saying, rural or where the rents are cheaper. Because we looked at that. We've been working on this for 8 years.
Right.
So we are in the heart of Miami. We are super excited about this project. And then what was most important to all of us on our board was that we would serve not only those adults that are able to be independent, but those who are not. So we are actually having 4 6-bedroom, absolutely gorgeous, I wish I lived there, homes, full-time staff, okay, to serve those adults as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I
it's
know like another place in Texas that's like that. And then also we have one in Utah. And I think what a lot of people struggle with is like what you said with the Medicaid waiver. If you don't have anything to allocate for the room and board, if you don't have any like supported decision, not supported decision making, supported living or like options for that, that can be really tricky. And a lot of people or a lot of places that I found also don't accept funding. And so it's all private pay. And it really makes it tricky for some of us who don't have resources. Like, for instance, I'm working with one mom and she's a single mom in Massachusetts and she's doing exactly the same thing that you're doing, trying to find someone to care for her children after she passes. And so that's what I'm helping her research as well is private trustees and guardians. And also one thing that is interesting to consider when you're setting up your trust, it might be wise to use a professional executor so that the decision isn't put on my other 3 kids. Or, as people move out of state and you consider things like guardianship, if you think, oh, okay, my oldest daughter, she's going to be Jackson's guardian, but she's going to move to Georgia and we're in Utah. So what do we do, for that piece? These are all things that we want to consider, and it's really helpful to talk through it with another parent or somebody like me as a disability navigator to help you think of things you might not have considered, like what Karen said tonight. There was things on the call that she hadn't quite thought of in the same way. And so Karen brings up great points with housing. Look into what resources are available. Again, tap into the SSI and Medicaid. But if private pay is the only option, then let's think about that. You have time right now because you're still alive to plan for it. If it is a private pay unit in Texas, how am I going to fund, $90,000 a year to pay for that? We can help you be creative and thoughtful and do it in a way that will work with your budget and then build on that as time goes on, as your circumstances change. So great points, Karen. Thank you for sharing that resource. That was Casa Familia Inc. for anybody.
Right. So when we did, I'll tell you real quickly because I know we're out of time. It was very important. Look, we have the haves and we have the have-nots and everything in between. And it was really important for us to make sure that we were not building this just for the haves. And so it is fully affordable, 100%. It is built with tax credits. It is very creative financing. It is, maybe there's a few like this in the country, but not many that we know of. There's a few in Florida. They're not exactly like this. They don't have the service package tied to it. There's Independence Landing. We've got Promise. So Florida's really to be honest, is so a lot of people can't believe it. Florida is really a great state to be in if you have disabilities, because we do have a lot of programs that are funded, or if they're self-paid, are not super pricey. And the housing is, we do have a lot of affordable housing, specific for IDD. Now
Good.
there are wait lists and they're full, but more and more are coming, there more and more are being built.
Well, good. Yeah, I know the parents I've worked with haven't been able to, they don't qualify for the waiver, so it has been tricky for them in Florida, but I'm so glad to hear that you're hearing good things about services. Any
Mhm.
other last minute questions before we go? And we're just down to a few of us now. Anything else I can help you with tonight while you have me? Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining. If you need that consultation link, it's just there in the chat, and I'd be happy to help you. And watch for our upcoming webinars. We try to switch it up a little bit each week to give people new information. And so we'll be moving to a more targeted webinar now that we've done these first few introduction webinars. So watch for those, and thank you for sharing tonight. It's so great to get all of your perspective from across the country and what works for you in your state and what's working in other states. So thank you so much and have a great night, everybody.